Welcome to Hidden Ties, where every story hides a deeper truth. I was lying in that sterile hospital room, my leg throbbing with pain, feeling utterly invisible as my parents sat there, hardly sparing me a glance. In that moment, I decided I'd make them regret this deeply. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'd love to know. I never thought I'd be here. Hospital bed, broken leg, and most importantly, alone. Let me start from the beginning. I'm 51 years old, and I've spent most of my life trying to make my parents proud. Growing up, they were the type to put on a show, always so proper, so polished. My dad was a successful lawyer, and my mom was the picture of grace, a stay-at-home mom who ran the house like a tight ship. They were the kind of parents that loved the idea of being perfect. I think they still do. But I never quite fit into that mold. I've always been a bit of a wanderer, someone who'd rather take a less conventional path. I left home for college when I was 18, and I never looked back. My career? Not what they expected. I didn't follow in my dad's footsteps into law. Instead, I became a photographer, someone who saw the world through a lens. I worked for a small company doing freelance work, capturing moments for magazines, weddings, you name it. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. It was enough. And yet, whenever I'd visit home, I could see the disappointment in their eyes. I wasn't living the life they envisioned for me, but I shrugged it off. I was used to it by now. That morning was no different. I had just wrapped up a wedding shoot, and I was heading back to my apartment when it happened. I wasn't paying attention. Running late for a meeting, I thought I saw a friend across the street. My foot caught on the uneven pavement, and before I knew it, I was on the ground. I didn't even know what happened at first, just a sharp pain in my leg, and then everything went black. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed. The lights were too bright, the smell too sterile. I tried to move my leg, but a scream shot through my body. "Easy there," the nurse said, her voice soft but firm. "You've got a bad break. We'll get you sorted, but you need to rest." My mind was foggy, but I could make sense of things. A broken leg. Great. Just what I needed. But the real punch came when I looked up and saw my parents standing at the foot of my bed. They didn't say anything right away. They just stood there, arms crossed, looking down at me. "Mom, Dad, My voice was hoarse and I struggled to sit up, but the pain shot through me again. I winced. "How could you be so careless?" My mom's voice was cold, sharp, cutting. "You're not getting any younger, you know. You should have been more careful." My dad didn't speak at first, but the disappointment was clear in his eyes. I'd seen that look 1,000 times. It felt like the air around me had thickened, like their judgment was suffocating me. I wanted to scream at them, tell them how I didn't ask for their judgment, how I didn't ask for any of this. But I couldn't. The pain was too overwhelming. My leg hurt too much to fight back. They stayed for a few more minutes, offering no comfort, no words of encouragement. They just nodded, said they'd be back later, and left. It wasn't the first time I'd felt abandoned by them, but this time, it hit differently. "Great, just great," I muttered under my breath, tears starting to well up in my eyes. For a long time I just lay there in the sterile quiet, listening to the hum of the machines, the bustle outside my room. The pain in my leg was nothing compared to the pain in my chest, the loneliness, the betrayal. My parents, always so detached, so concerned about appearances, had once again made me feel like I wasn't worth their time, their empathy. I couldn't even look at them without feeling like I was the disappointment. But then a thought struck me. I had to make them regret it, not just a little, deeply. I spent the next few days in the hospital, not really recovering, not really resting. The nurses would come in and out checking on me, but it felt like a blur. I was stuck in this place, my leg immobilized, my mind racing with thoughts of revenge. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not some crazy person plotting malicious acts against my parents. But what they did, the way they dismissed me like I was an inconvenience, was something I couldn't just forget. I was tired of being the one they could always look down on, the one who never measured up. This was my time to flip the script. And maybe it wasn't rational, but in that moment, it was all I could think about. The day after they left, the pain in my leg wasn't as bad, but the emotional ache was still there. I had my phone with me, so I messaged my sister, Rachel. She was my one ally in this whole thing. Rachel and I were close growing up, but she was married now, with kids of her own, and lived in another city. I didn't want to burden her with all my problems, but I needed someone to talk to. They came in and barely said a word. It was like I didn't even matter. I swear, Rachel, they think I'm some kind of failure. I'm so sorry, sis. That's awful. Do you want me to come? I thought about it for a moment. It would have been nice, but I didn't want her to make the long drive for something so trivial. It wasn't like I was dying, just a broken leg and bruised ego. No, it's okay, but I need to figure this out on my own. That's when the idea really hit me. If I couldn't have their empathy, then I'd make them see me, really see me, through something they'd understand. My parents were all about appearances, about doing things by the book, so what better way to get under their skin than to show them how much their indifference had impacted me? I wasn't going to beg for their love or approval anymore. The next time they came in, I was ready, or so I thought. When my mom walked in later that afternoon, she was holding a cup of coffee, her heels clicking against the floor with that same rhythmic sound that had always made me feel so small. She looked around the room, then focused on me like I was some project she was mildly interested in. "How are you feeling?" she asked in her usual tone, the one that made it clear she wasn't truly asking. She was just being polite, as if this was something I had to earn. "Fine," I said, my voice colder than I intended. I shifted in the bed, trying not to wince as I adjusted my leg. "But I've been thinking—" Her eyes narrowed. "About what?" I took a deep breath. "About how you and Dad have always treated me. How I've spent my whole life trying to get your approval, and yet, no matter what I do, it's never enough." She paused. Her gaze softened for a moment, but it was fleeting. "This is a bit dramatic, don't you think? You're just hurt right now. It's not the end of the world." I could feel the anger rising inside me, but I kept it under control. This wasn't about a fight. It was about making her understand. "No, it's not dramatic. You don't get it, do you? The way you talk to me, the way you look at me, it's like I'm never good enough for you. I'm not the perfect daughter you wanted. I'm not the one who followed all your rules and became a lawyer or whatever. But I'm still your daughter, and I've been treated like I don't matter." She took a sip of her coffee, then set it down slowly, as though she were considering what I said, but I could tell she didn't really get it. Not yet. "You're just being emotional," she said, her voice distant now. "We don't need to go over this again." My heart sank. It was exactly what I expected to hear. I tried to keep my composure. "It's not just that. You don't even notice how you treat me sometimes, how you only show up when it's convenient for you." Her face hardened, her jaw tightening. "I don't need to justify myself to you." "Exactly," I said quietly. "That's the problem." I didn't wait for her to respond. I turned my head toward the window, watching the cars go by. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I was done begging for approval. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me anymore. That feeling of control, that was what I needed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to apologize for existing. The days that followed were a mixture of tension and silence. My parents, not used to me being so blunt, started to pull away. My mom, in particular, seemed to retreat into herself, the walls between us growing thicker with every passing day. But strangely, I wasn't as upset as I thought I'd be. In fact, I felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time, I was standing my ground. It wasn't that I didn't care about them. I did, deeply. But it was the way they had always disregarded my feelings that had caused this fracture. I was tired of waiting for their love on their terms. If they were going to be indifferent, then I would be indifferent right back. That was my revenge, and I was going to make sure they felt it, even if it was in a way they couldn't immediately understand. Then one afternoon, my father came by, alone this time. He had been quiet ever since the incident, and I noticed that his usual composure was gone, replaced by a sort of unease. It was strange seeing him like this, unraveled, vulnerable in a way that I hadn't expected. He stood at the door for a moment, almost hesitant, like he wasn't sure how to approach me. "Can we talk?" he finally asked, his voice rough around the edges. I didn't immediately respond. I had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, I wasn't sure what I wanted to say. My leg still hurt, but it wasn't the physical pain that bothered me anymore. It was the emotional wreckage I had been carrying for years, the constant feeling of being overlooked, of being seen as a disappointment. "I guess," I said, my voice flat, but the words hung in the air, filled with more meaning than I was letting on. He walked in slowly, sitting on the edge of the chair across from me, his hands clasped in front of him. It was as if he were gathering the courage to say something important, but I wasn't going to make this easy for him. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he started, his voice steady, though there was a slight tremble in it. "About how we treated you, how we've treated you your whole life. I didn't realize how much it hurt you." I looked at him then, really looked at him. My father, the man who had always seemed so untouchable, was now admitting that he had been wrong. It was surreal, almost as if the whole world had shifted on its axis. I had expected him to defend himself, to brush me off like he always did. But here he was, trying to understand. "Dad," I said, my voice soft but firm. "It's not just about that one moment. It's everything. You and Mom, you've always been so focused on what I wasn't, that you never bothered to notice what I was. I've spent so many years just trying to fit into this image that you created, but I can't do it anymore. It's exhausting." He nodded, his eyes looking down, the weight of my words sinking in. There was no defense now. He had nothing to hide behind. "You're right," he admitted quietly. "We've always pushed you, expected things of you that maybe weren't fair. I guess we were just so caught up in wanting you to succeed, to be like us, that we didn't see the toll it was taking on you. I thought we were doing the right thing." I didn't speak for a long time after that. I could feel the anger, the resentment, still bubbling inside me, but it was different now. It wasn't about getting revenge anymore. It was about acknowledging the hurt, letting go of the weight I had been carrying all these years, and somehow, in this moment, I could feel myself starting to release it. "But I don't want that for you anymore," he added, his voice growing more determined. "I want to support you no matter what you choose. I'm sorry for not seeing you for who you really are." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to shout, to scream that this apology was long overdue, that it didn't make everything okay, but another part of me just felt tired. Maybe this was a start. Maybe, for once, I could stop fighting and just accept what he was offering. I wasn't sure if I could forgive him right then and there, but I could hear the sincerity in his voice, and that, at least, was something. "Thanks," I said quietly, unsure of what else to add. "It means something to hear you say that." He stood up, and for the first time in a long while, he reached out to me. He didn't say anything else, just gave me a quick, unexpected hug. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and in that moment it felt like a step toward healing. When he left, I was left alone with my thoughts again. I couldn't quite put everything into words, but something had shifted. My parents were still flawed, and we still had a long way to go. But I wasn't going to let their neglect define me anymore. And for the first time in ages, I felt free. In the days following that conversation with my dad, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, but I wasn't sure what. He'd apologized, but I still didn't know how to move forward. I wasn't exactly ready to fall into his arms and pretend that everything was okay. I'd spent years crafting a hardened shell around my heart, and I wasn't sure if I could just shed it in a single moment, no matter how sincere his apology had been. What I did know was that this wasn't over. Not for me, not for them. I spent a few more days in the hospital, my legs slowly healing, though it felt like my emotional wounds were taking much longer to stitch together. My mom didn't visit as often after our last conversation. I could feel her retreating back into her shell, the walls between us growing higher with every hour that passed. It frustrated me, to be honest. I was angry, yes, but I was also tired. Tired of this dance we had been doing for decades. It felt like we were always 2 steps away from understanding each other, but never quite reaching the point where we could genuinely connect. I was sitting up in bed, staring out the window, when the door creaked open again. It was her, my mom. She stood there for a second, her figure framed by the doorway, the way she always stood. Perfect posture, no sign of vulnerability. She hesitated before stepping inside, and it was obvious she was trying to figure out how to approach me. "How's your leg?" she asked, the question barely above a whisper, her voice strained. "Fine," I replied curtly, not bothering to look at her. "It's healing." I heard her step closer, the soft rustling of her dress against the floor the only sound in the room. It was strange, the silence between us. My mom, who had always filled every room with her presence, now felt like a ghost. "Look," she began, her tone softer now. "I'm sorry. I know I've been distant. I didn't mean to hurt you." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I studied her. My mother, who had always been the image of strength, of control, was now standing there in front of me, her walls starting to crack. I knew she was trying, really trying, but it didn't feel enough, not yet. "You've always been so hard to reach," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "So perfect. I never knew how to be enough for you." Her eyes softened, her lips trembling slightly. "I'm sorry you felt that way." I couldn't bring myself to say more. My feelings were still tangled up in the years of hurt, the constant feeling of being overlooked, dismissed. I knew this wasn't something we could fix in one conversation, but for the first time I saw her trying, truly trying to break through. That alone was more than I'd ever gotten from her in all these years. "You can't just say sorry and expect everything to be fine," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's not that simple." She nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and something else, vulnerability maybe. "I know, I've been a bad mother in some ways. I see that now, but I want to change. I want to do better. I want to be here for you, not just as your mother, but as someone who understands you." The words she spoke weren't just an apology, they were a promise. It was raw, real. I could feel the sincerity, even if I wasn't sure I could trust it completely yet. I didn't know how to respond. For so many years, I had yearned for this moment, but now that it was happening, I wasn't sure if I could let my guard down. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to. The silence between us stretched on for what felt like an eternity before I finally spoke. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," I said, the honesty in my voice surprising even me. "But I'll try. I'll try if you really mean it." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I mean it. I swear, I do." It wasn't a magical fix. It wasn't the fairy tale ending that I used to dream about. But it was something. A beginning, at least. We sat in silence for a while, just the two of us in that small hospital room, the weight of everything between us hanging in the air. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe there was hope for us after all. The days after that conversation were quieter. My mom came to visit more often, but there was a noticeable difference. She tried harder, paid attention to the smallest things, like making sure my water glass was full or that I had enough pillows to support my leg. It wasn't much, but it was something I'd never seen from her before. And even though it wasn't perfect, even though the road ahead was still unclear, I couldn't help but feel a tiny spark of hope inside me. It was late one afternoon when my mom came in again, this time without her usual cool composure. She was wearing a soft sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose bun, and she looked tired but peaceful. It was almost as if she had let go of the armor she'd always worn around herself. "I was thinking," she started, sitting down beside me on the edge of the bed, "maybe it's time I do more than just show up. Maybe it's time I actually learn to listen, to hear you, not just what I want to hear." Her words caught me off guard. I hadn't expected such a direct statement, especially not from her. She'd always been the one who set the tone, who expected everyone to follow her lead. But now, for the first time in my life, I saw her as a person, not just a mother or a figurehead. She was vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before, and I didn't know how to react. "I'm here for you, in any way you need me," she added, her voice quieter now. "I know I've messed up, but I want to make it right." I looked at her for a moment, letting the silence settle between us. Then finally I said the one thing I had been holding back for so long. "I want you to see me," I whispered. "Not as your perfect daughter. Not as someone who's just supposed to fit into the life you imagined. Just see me." She nodded, her eyes moist with unshed tears. "I do see you. I just didn't know how to show you that. I'm so sorry for not being what you needed." There was something in her voice, something raw, something real, that made the walls inside me start to crumble. It wasn't an instant fix, it wasn't an immediate resolution, but it was a breakthrough, a beginning. The next few weeks passed slowly. My leg healed and the physical pain faded, but the emotional scars I had carried for years didn't vanish overnight. I wasn't sure if they ever would. But what I did know was that my relationship with my parents had changed. Not in a grand, sweeping way, but in small, significant moments. In the way my dad called me more often to check in, not just to see how my leg was doing, but to ask how I was feeling. In the way my mom started to leave little notes for me on the hospital table, just to remind me she cared. I was still recovering, but it wasn't just from the broken leg. I was recovering from years of emotional neglect. I was learning to let go of the hurt, to let my parents be human, to let myself be seen. And for the first time, I felt like I was truly being heard. The real transformation came when I left the hospital. I could walk again, albeit with a crutch. But it wasn't the physical healing that made the biggest impact. It was the shift in my perspective. I didn't need my parents to validate me anymore. I didn't need them to change who they were. But I needed them to respect me as I was, flaws and all. And for the first time, I felt like they were finally starting to do that. Months later, after everything had settled into a new rhythm, I found myself sitting on the porch one evening, the air cool against my skin. My parents were sitting beside me, my dad reading a book, and my mom quietly sipping her tea. For a long time, I hadn't known how to be comfortable in their presence, how to just be me without the pressure to perform or prove anything. But now, in the quiet of that evening, with the stars beginning to light up the sky, I felt a peace I hadn't known before. It wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about never having problems or fighting all the time. It was about finally learning how to exist together, imperfectly, but with understanding. The hurt of the past wasn't completely gone. It may never be. But the way forward was clearer now. My parents were trying, and for the first time in my life, I was allowing myself to try too. "I'm glad you're okay," my dad said, breaking the silence, his voice quiet but warm. It was a simple statement, but in that moment, it meant everything. He didn't need to say more. I didn't need more. We were here, and that was enough. "Me too," I said, a small smile creeping onto my face. "Me too." There were still moments when the past would rear its head, when old wounds would ache. But now I understood something deeper. Healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about moving forward, learning to live with the scars, and finding a way to let love grow in places that had once been barren. I had made them regret their indifference. But in doing so, I had found my own strength. And that was the greatest revenge of all.